He was a man who had everything most people dream about. At just 28, Jason owned luxury cars, a penthouse apartment in the city, and a business that made more money in a month than some people earned in a year. But despite his wealth, Jason carried a quiet frustration. Time and time again, the women he dated seemed more interested in his lifestyle than in him. Each relationship ended with the same bitter question: did they love Jason the man or Jason the millionaire? One evening, after another disappointing date that had turned into a showcase of his bank account, Jason sat at home with his best friend Marcus. It was then that he confessed the truth. He couldn't keep living like this. He couldn't keep guessing at people's intentions. Marcus, half joking, suggested something bold. What if Jason pretended to be poor? What if he stripped away everything flashy and approached someone as an ordinary man? The idea stuck in Jason's head. For years he had used his wealth like armor, but what if it was the very thing standing in his way? That night he made a decision. He would hide his fortune. He would step into the world as an average guy and see who would treat him with kindness when there was nothing to gain. The next morning, Jason began preparing for his new role. The tailored suit stayed in the closet. The expensive watch came off his wrist. He borrowed Marcus's old Honda Civic, a car with peeling paint and a dent in the passenger side door. When he looked at himself in the mirror, dressed in a simple hoodie and worn-out jeans, he barely recognized the man staring back. For once, there was no image to uphold, no wealth to project. There was only Jason. He chose a local coffee shop far from the parts of town where his name might be recognized. It was a modest place with faded menus on the wall and the smell of fresh espresso drifting through the air. Jason ordered the cheapest black coffee and sat near the window, quietly observing the world around him. That was when she walked in. Samantha. She had an elegance that drew attention immediately. A designer handbag hung from her shoulder, and her heels clicked against the wooden floor as if announcing her presence. Heads turned as she moved toward the counter. Jason noticed the way she carried herself, confident, polished, accustomed to being noticed. Their paths crossed when Jason stood up to grab a napkin and accidentally brushed against her arm. He apologized quickly, and she gave a polite smile. It was the kind of smile that seemed practiced yet inviting enough to continue the conversation. A few casual words turned into more. She told him she was new to the neighborhood, stopping by the cafe while running errands. He mentioned that he worked in construction, keeping the details vague. There was a flicker in her eyes, subtle but telling. She nodded politely, though the warmth in her tone dipped ever so slightly. Jason recognized the shift, the almost imperceptible change in energy when someone hears you don't have much to offer. But Samantha didn't walk away. She stayed, sipping her latte, asking Jason small questions. The two of them talked for nearly an hour. Samantha carried herself like someone used to fine things, but Jason couldn't deny her charm. She was quick with her words, sharp with her observations, and confident in the way she spoke. Still, he wondered, was she interested in him or simply passing the time? As they left the cafe together, Samantha gave him her number. Jason thanked her and slid the paper into his pocket. On the surface, it was a normal first meeting, but Jason knew the real test had only just begun. That night, he lay awake replaying the interaction in his mind. He wondered if his disguise had worked. He wondered if Samantha would still answer his calls when there was no promise of luxury dinners or expensive gifts. More importantly, he wondered if he would finally get the answer he had been searching for. Could someone care for Jason the man without the fortune that defined him? This was only the beginning. Jason called Samantha 2 days after their first meeting. His voice was calm, casual, stripped of the confidence that usually came with status. To his relief, she picked up quickly and agreed to see him again. He suggested dinner, but not at the kind of place most women expected from him. Instead, he chose a small family diner on the edge of town, a place with checkered tablecloths, laminated menus, and affordable prices. When Samantha arrived, her appearance was as polished as before. She wore a tailored dress and carried another designer bag, her hair perfectly styled as if she were heading to a high-end restaurant. Jason noticed the brief pause in her expression when she realized where they were. It wasn't disappointment loud enough to cause a scene, but it was there, subtle, fleeting, like a shadow passing across her face. She sat down anyway, and Jason watched closely. She ordered a salad and water while Jason ordered a burger and fries. Their conversation flowed easily enough, filled with questions about childhood's favorite hobbies and dreams for the future. Yet Jason caught hints, small moments where she seemed disinterested when the topic turned to his job. He told her he worked in construction, mostly long shifts that left him tired. He described the simplicity of his apartment, the ordinary routines of his week. Samantha nodded, but her eyes drifted whenever the words carried no hint of glamour. When the bill arrived, Jason paid without hesitation, though it was only a fraction of what he usually spent on a night out. Samantha didn't offer to contribute, nor did Jason expect her to, but he noticed the lack of acknowledgement. For her, it seemed natural that he should cover everything, regardless of the setting. Despite the warning signs, Jason continued to see her. Each meeting became another quiet experiment. On their second date, he suggested a walk in the park, bringing sandwiches he had made at home. Samantha arrived in heels, clearly unprepared for a long walk on uneven paths. She smiled politely, but her discomfort showed as she picked her way along the gravel. When Jason handed her the sandwich, wrapped in foil, she accepted it with hesitation. She took a few bites, complimented the effort, but quickly shifted the conversation toward vacations she dreamed of taking, hotels she had read about, and luxury shopping districts she wanted to visit someday. Jason listened, nodding, filing every detail away. By the third date, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Samantha enjoyed his company, but her excitement only sparked when the conversation brushed against wealth, ambition, or luxury. When Jason talked about long workdays and tight budgets, she seemed to fade. Still, she remained charming, attentive in the way someone might be when weighing potential gain. Jason decided it was time to push further. He told her he was saving money, that he couldn't afford to eat out much, and suggested cooking dinner at his place. She agreed, though her tone carried less enthusiasm. That evening, he welcomed her into Marcus's modest apartment, which he had borrowed for the night to keep his real life hidden. The furniture was old, the decor plain, and the space far smaller than what Jason was used to. Samantha scanned the room with carefully masked judgment before sitting down. Jason cooked pasta, nothing elaborate, just noodles and jarred sauce. Samantha ate quietly, offering compliments but without conviction. After dinner, she scrolled on her phone, pausing occasionally to show him a pair of shoes or a handbag she liked online. Each item cost more than the car he had arrived in. For Jason, the evidence was mounting. Samantha wasn't cruel, nor was she openly dismissive. But the gap between her world and the one he presented was widening with every encounter. He could sense her patience thinning, as though she were waiting for him to reveal some hidden truth, some proof that the humble life he described wasn't the full story. One night, as they sat together after another modest meal, Samantha asked a question that confirmed his suspicions. She leaned back, looked him over, and said, almost casually, "So, do you see yourself staying in construction forever?" The way she phrased it carried more weight than curiosity. It was a test, a probe for ambition, for the promise of wealth in the future. Jason answered honestly within the confines of his disguise. He told her he was comfortable where he was, that as long as he could pay rent and cover his bills, he was satisfied. He wanted a simple life. Samantha smiled, but it was thin, tight, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, Jason sat alone in the borrowed apartment, thinking about everything he had seen. Samantha hadn't walked away yet, but the cracks were showing. She enjoyed the idea of companionship, but it was clear she was waiting for more, for something he wasn't offering in his act. Jason realized the time was coming. If Samantha was truly only there for the promise of wealth, the next stage of his plan would reveal it beyond doubt. Weeks passed, and Jason continued his experiment. Each date with Samantha felt like another step deeper into a role he was beginning to tire of. The borrowed Honda rattled whenever he drove her home. The cheap meals, the modest outings, the careful lies about working long hours just to make ends meet. They weighed on him. But he endured it, because he needed clarity. Samantha never complained directly, but her subtle signals grew louder. She checked her phone often when they were out, scrolling through social media posts of friends vacationing in Europe, dining at rooftop restaurants, posing with champagne glasses in hand. Sometimes she would turn her screen toward Jason, showing him a photo and laughing, then adding, "We should go somewhere like this one day." Jason always replied with the same steady tone, reminding her that his budget didn't allow for luxuries. Her smile would falter, just for a moment, before she smoothed it over again. The turning point came one Friday night. Jason suggested they meet at a food truck lot near the downtown area. The air smelled of grilled meat and fried dough, and the crowd buzzed with casual energy. Jason ordered 2 tacos for himself and offered to pay for hers as well, but Samantha declined, saying she wasn't hungry. She picked at a small lemonade instead, her expression distant, her eyes scanning the couples around them. Jason noticed the way she seemed restless, as though she were waiting for something more impressive, something worth dressing up for. She barely touched her drink before suggesting they leave. Jason obliged, driving her back in the old Honda. The silence in the car was heavy. The next morning, Samantha called him. Her tone was polite, but clipped. She told him she was busy for the next few days, then added, "Maybe we can do something nicer next time. You know, dinner at a real restaurant." Jason listened, his suspicions hardening into certainty. She wasn't content with simplicity. She was tolerating it, waiting, testing him just as much as he was testing her. He realized the time had come to end the act. He spent the weekend preparing. The plan was simple. Invite her out one more time, give her the choice between walking away or revealing her true motives. Only this time he wouldn't be driving the old Honda. He wouldn't be in worn-out sneakers and a hoodie. He would arrive as himself. When the evening came, Jason dressed in one of his sharp suits. He slipped the Rolex back onto his wrist, the one he had avoided for weeks. His confidence returned, not forced, but natural, the way he carried himself when he wasn't pretending to be someone else. He stepped into his garage, slid into his Lamborghini, and felt the engine roar beneath him. For weeks he had hidden his reality. Now, it was time to reveal it. Jason picked Samantha up outside her apartment. She stood on the curb, dressed elegantly as always, and her eyes widened at the sight of the car. She stepped forward slowly, almost in disbelief, running her hand across the sleek surface before slipping inside. The difference in her energy was immediate. Her smile stretched wider than ever, her laughter louder, her tone brighter. She complimented the car again and again, asked how long he'd had it, asked if he had others. Jason answered calmly, watching her closely, every word adding fuel to the fire of his suspicion. He drove her to an upscale restaurant, the kind of place she had hinted at for weeks. Chandeliers glowed above white tablecloths, and waiters in pressed uniforms guided them to their seats. Samantha's excitement was undeniable. She leaned across the table asking about his business, his travels, his apartment. Jason gave her glimpses of the truth now, revealing that he wasn't just a construction worker. He owned the company. He had investments, properties, a lifestyle far removed from the story he had told her before. Samantha's reaction was unmistakable. The polite, measured interest she had shown in the past transformed into fascination. She hung on his every word, her eyes sparkling, her body language alive in a way it had never been during the simpler dates. For Jason, it was the final confirmation. The woman sitting across from him wasn't interested in quiet walks, homemade dinners, or modest evenings. She was chasing the lifestyle, the image, the wealth. As dessert arrived, Jason looked at her carefully, his mind already made up. This dinner wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the end of the test. Soon, Samantha would learn the truth, that every moment of their time together had been part of an experiment to see her true intentions. Jason had seen enough. The mask had slipped, and her excitement over money had revealed everything he needed to know. The only question left was how to end it. The night of the reveal arrived with an energy Jason could feel in his chest. Samantha thought it was just another elegant evening, a celebration of wealth and luxury. For Jason, it was the climax of weeks of deception, a final act to expose what he already suspected. They sat in the glow of the restaurant's chandelier, the soft hum of conversations surrounding them. Samantha's eyes sparkled across the table, her posture poised, her laughter bubbling with new energy. Every time Jason mentioned his business, his cars, or his travels, her interest deepened. She leaned in closer, her gaze fixed on him, as though she had only just discovered who he truly was. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Jason wasn't pretending anymore. He wasn't the construction worker with a modest apartment and a borrowed car. He was himself, the man with money, power, and status. And Samantha's reaction was undeniable. Her charm had sharpened, her smile never faltered, and her questions all circled the same themes: wealth, lifestyle, opportunity. After dinner, Jason drove her through the city in his Lamborghini. The neon lights reflected across the hood as Samantha filmed short clips on her phone, angling herself carefully to capture both her face and the car. She uploaded them quickly, her followers showering her with admiration and curiosity. Jason said nothing, watching her from the corner of his eye. Finally, he parked outside his penthouse building. The valet opened the door and Samantha stepped out slowly, gazing up at the towering structure in awe. Jason led her upstairs, into the spacious apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering skyline. Samantha's reaction was immediate. She moved from room to room, touching the furniture, marveling at the decor, gasping at the view. Her enthusiasm overflowed, and Jason followed silently, noting every detail. This wasn't the calm composure she had shown at the diner, or the quiet politeness she carried in Marcus's modest apartment. This was raw excitement, unfiltered delight at stepping into a world she wanted desperately to be part of. When they finally sat down in the living room, Samantha looked at him with a new kind of admiration. She spoke quickly, talking about all the places they could travel together, the restaurants they should try, the parties they could attend. Her words spilled out like a vision of the life she believed was ahead of her. Jason let her speak, his face unreadable. Then, when the room fell into a rare moment of silence, he leaned forward. He told her the truth. He explained that the life she had seen tonight, the car, the penthouse, the wealth, was real. But it wasn't the life he had shown her before. For weeks he had hidden it all, pretending to be a man with little more than the basics. He described the old Honda, the small meals, the modest apartment, and reminded her that this was the version of him she had met. Samantha's smile faltered. Jason continued. He told her that the entire experiment had been about trust. He wanted to see if someone could value him without the money, without the glamour. He wanted to know if someone could stay, even when there was nothing to gain. And over the past few weeks, he had watched closely. Every reaction, every word, every hesitation had painted a picture. Samantha's face shifted, her expression caught between surprise and indignation. She tried to laugh it off at first, saying it was silly, unnecessary, that of course she liked him. But Jason's eyes stayed locked on hers, steady and unflinching. He told her he had seen enough. The spark in her eyes had only ever appeared in the presence of wealth. The charm she now radiated was the proof he had been waiting for. The room grew cold. Samantha tried again, her voice softer, more desperate. She said it didn't matter what he had or didn't have, that she had enjoyed their time together. But Jason didn't believe it. Too many small cracks had shown the truth. Too many polite smiles when faced with simplicity. Too many restless sighs when the dates were humble. Too much disinterest when the conversation lacked ambition. Jason stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. He told her that the experiment was over. He thanked her for her time, for playing her part, but he couldn't give her what she wanted. Samantha's tone hardened. The charm dropped. She asked if he was serious, if he was really ending things now after showing her everything. Her words sharpened into anger, her disappointment raw and unfiltered. For the first time, the mask she wore cracked completely, revealing the frustration beneath. Jason didn't argue. He opened the door and told her the night was over. Samantha left without another word. The click of her heels echoed down the hallway, fading into silence. Jason closed the door behind her and exhaled slowly. The experiment had ended exactly as he expected, but the weight of confirmation still pressed heavily on him. He wasn't surprised, yet he felt a sting of disappointment. Not because he had lost Samantha, she was never his to begin with, but because his suspicion about people's intentions had been proven right once again. He walked back to the window, staring at the city below. The lights glimmered, beautiful yet distant, a reminder of the world he lived in and the challenges that came with it. Somewhere out there, he believed, was someone who would see him for who he was, not for what he had. But tonight he had faced the truth. Samantha had been a gold digger, and his disguise had brought her true self into the open. The experiment was complete. Jason's test with Samantha was over, but the lessons it left behind were just beginning to sink in. For weeks, he had lived in disguise, trading tailored suits and supercars for hoodies and an old Honda. In doing so, he had stripped away the safety net of wealth and placed himself in a position where only sincerity could shine through. What he found instead was a painful truth, that charm can be deceiving and attention can be conditional. In the days that followed, Samantha attempted to reach out. Her messages were friendly at first, pretending nothing had happened, suggesting another dinner, another night out. When Jason didn't respond, the tone shifted. Her words grew colder, accusing him of playing games, of wasting her time. Soon, the messages stopped altogether. Jason didn't answer any of them. He had no desire to argue or explain further. The experiment had revealed what he needed to see, and he knew there was nothing left to salvage. Yet the experience weighed on him. It wasn't about Samantha anymore, it was about trust. How could he open his life to someone new when the shadow of doubt loomed so large? How could he separate genuine affection from opportunism? For Jason, these were questions without easy answers. Marcus, his closest friend, offered his own perspective. He reminded Jason that not everyone would be like Samantha, that there were people who valued more than material wealth. But Marcus also admitted that Jason's path would never be simple. Wealth had a way of changing how others saw you, whether you wanted it to or not. Despite the disappointment, Jason didn't regret what he had done. Pretending to be poor had shown him the reality of Samantha's intentions, sparing him from investing months or even years into a relationship built on fragile foundations. The disguise had been uncomfortable, humbling, and even lonely at times, but it had served its purpose. It had revealed the truth. As time passed, Jason returned to his normal routines. The suits came back out of the closet, the cars back onto the streets, the business back to the forefront of his daily life. But his perspective had shifted. He no longer wore his wealth with the same ease. Where once it had been a source of pride, now it felt like a veil, something that could obscure rather than reveal who he truly was. He thought often of that first night in the coffee shop, when Samantha smiled at him before she knew anything about his life. For a brief moment, he had believed in the possibility of connection without condition, but the weeks that followed had taught him otherwise. Still, Jason refused to let cynicism consume him. He knew that somewhere, perhaps when he least expected it, he would meet someone different. Someone who wouldn't care about the car he drove or the apartment he lived in. Someone who would sit across from him at a diner and listen, not out of courtesy but out of genuine interest. Someone who would laugh at a homemade meal and feel grateful for the effort, not disappointed by the simplicity. Until that day came, Jason carried the memory of his experiment as both a warning and a guide. It reminded him that appearances could be deceiving, that wealth could attract as much insincerity as admiration, and that trust had to be earned, not assumed. His story stood as a testament to a truth many prefer to ignore. Money can open doors, but it can also disguise intentions. And when the glamour fades, only authenticity remains. For Jason, the search for authenticity would continue, not with disguises or experiments, but with patience and hope. Because in the end, he wasn't looking for someone to share his wealth. He was looking for someone to share his life. And that difference, he now understood, made all the difference in the world.